everyone. This is Faith at Faith and Books. How are you doing? I am going to dedicate this particular post to my theology reading, a retrospective of what I did in 2024 and what I plan to do in 2025. So if you are not interested in that, I'll be back with talking about other things, tags and book reviews and that sort of thing. But this is just going to focus on theology and also the Theology Book Club. Because last year I started on Discord a Theology Book Club, and we only have a few people participating, but I really want to grow it this year, and so it's going to be a major focus for me. But I thought I would just look back at 2024 because I had a very good year. I started off reading Acts of the Apostles because I had read Advent 2023. I had read the Gospel of Luke because there are 24 chapters. So I read one a day up to Christmas. And then I was interested in continuing on with Luke because Luke is purported also to have written the Acts of the Apostles. So I read the Acts of the Apostles. And of course, the second half of the Acts really focuses on Paul. And at the same time, Jennifer Brooks passed away, tragically. And I was getting ready to start up the what Mark at Book Time with Elvis named There's No Place Like Rome. So we're going to read a lot about Roman history in March and April. And so that kind of tied in with my reading. So let me I'm not holding up a Bible, but I read Acts of the Apostles. And then that led me to want to read this book by N.T. Wright. This was a buddy read with a couple other people. I think this is what spurred me to start the Theology Book Club. But this was a book recommended by Jennifer Brooks. And I for some reason I had bought it already. So I think I was planning to read it on her recommendation. And so there was the We Love Jenny readathon, and so this was my pick. And of course, this also tied in with There's No Place Like Rome because he was a Roman citizen. He used that as his defense, and he was eventually executed by the Roman government. And, everything, all his epistles and everything are really steeped in that Roman time period, that first century time period. So it was an excellent read. I really enjoyed it. And then that led me to later in the summer with the Theology Book Club reading all the letters of Paul. So I spent the summer reading his epistles, and that was a wonderful exploration. These books, the Navarre Bible, they have so much in them. There's so many footnotes. I mean, it's just so many cross references to the Old Testament, to the other parts of the New Testament, to the church fathers, to writings of the saints, to papal documents, encyclicals, and that sort of thing. So just really, it was too much for me. I basically read the each epistle, and then what I didn't understand, I would look down and read all the footnotes. But a really, really good, I think, a really good Bible study or commentary. And my husband, I don't have it with me, it's a big stack, but my husband, I don't think he knew that I'd gotten all the letters. He gave me the entire set of the Navarre Bible commentaries for the New Testament. So I have the whole set now. So I'm thinking of donating this one to my church. Anyway, so yeah, that was neat. So then, so the We Love Jenny readathon led to this. And kind of the formation of the Theology Book Club. So yes, I read those. Let's see. I read 2 novels and an epic poem that, to me, had a lot of theological heft to them. And the first one was, let me get it up here. It was Frost in May. I've mentioned this several times, by Antonia White or Antonia White. I never know how to say it. This was a Virago modern classic, and it's the story of a young girl whose father has converted to Catholicism. She has 2. She's very gung-ho. She goes to a boarding school run by these very strict nuns. And there's a lot of there was a lot of really well understood theology in the book. But the problem was that the nuns were really repressive and prudish, and they overdid it. Can't think of the name of the heresy, but there's a heresy where you think like the body is evil, the body is good, God created the body. But there was a prudishness and a repressiveness. And so it's all about the young girl's experiences, and then at the end, she's an older teen, and there's this the nuns are so strict that they really become unjust, and she gets caught in a very unjust situation, and you can see it kind of shatters her faith. And so it was a really good book. I really liked it, and like I've said before, I want to read the rest of it. It's a quartet. I think they say it right here in this. Yeah, it's a quartet. There's Frost and May came out in 1933, then The Lost Traveler 1950, The Sugar House 1952, and then Beyond the Glass 1954. So, and it was made into a BBC TV serial in 1982. So anyway, that was a really good read. I did that with Sean D. Standfast in his Faded Pages book club. The other novel that I read was a buddy read with Kelly at Books I'm Not Reading, and it was In This House of Brede. And this also had nuns in it, but these nuns were quite different. It's about a woman who is at the top of her career in a time when you don't think about women having, really influential careers. She does, but she gives it all up and she becomes a cloistered nun. And it's all about her transition. And it's also all about the other nuns and their stories. And it's very well written. It's a very quiet book. It's got sort of this inner glow to it, but it's a quiet book. And you don't mix up the personalities of the nuns or anything. She has a big cast of characters, yet she's very fluid and but there's clarity about what each nun is going through. It's very, very well written. I think it's considered a classic. And it was a reread for me. I didn't remember much of it though, and I really enjoyed reading this with Kelly. So that was another book that to me, did I say this already? When I say theology, I'm not talking strictly the academic subject. I'm talking about anything that has religious or spiritual overtones, that's more than just superficial. So this one and Frost and May, I'm including in my list. I really enjoyed them. And then I also read this epic poem, The Ballad of the White Horse by G.K. Chesterton. And I didn't realize this, but Jennifer Brooks also really loved this poem. She says, and I just recently watched a video of hers where she was talking about epic poetry because I'm just starting to read Paradise Lost and I want to see what she had to say about it. And she said that she had read this 10 times. She had lines memorized from it. So this was really enjoyable. It's G.K. Chesterton takes the battle that King Alfred fought where he finally defeated the Vikings, and he turns that into sort of an archetypal battle between good and evil. And it was really, it was just beautiful poetry, beautiful, clever poetry, just absolutely. It was a joy to read. It was not hard to read at all. It was not a struggle to read. So this was a very good book. And the White Horse is actually a prehistoric horse that's been carved into a hillside. I think they have a picture of it here. Where is it? So that's what he's talking about initially, but he ties it into the White Horse from Revelation. And I also did a study of Revelation this year with my church. We used this workbook. We read the scripture and went through it with a fine-tooth comb. And it was so incredibly illuminating. It's just wonderful. So the Catholic Church does not look on Revelation as only about the future. I forget what that's called, futurist or something. Because we don't really know the time or the day. when things are going to happen. And so we don't use it to try to predict. But it does tell us something. It's definitely giving us a message about that aspect. So we're not dismissing that element, but primarily it's read as something just historically a vision that John, the Apostle St. John, had, and he sent it out to the churches to comfort them in a time of persecution. So, and it's talking about the coming destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. But also it is tied in with our understanding of what heaven is. And it's so rich with Old Testament references. I think that they said there are 500 Old Testament references in the book of Revelation, which isn't that long of a book, so that's a lot. Anyway, this was a really highly enjoyable study. So valuable. If you sign up for this is a Catholic Bible study group called Ascension. If you sign up, you get to rewatch the videos for a year. You have permission to go in there and watch them for a year once you buy the set. And so I would really like to do that. I don't know when, but I would like to rewatch them because I feel like there was a lot I missed and a lot I could rehear and I would get more out of it. So yeah, so that was Revelation. And let's see. Earlier in Lent, and I think this was a group read with Christy Lewis and a couple other people, Peg of the History Shelf, and was it Tiffany? Yeah, maybe. I can't remember, I'm so sorry. But we read The Long Loneliness. This was a book that I read back in my 20s that was sort of on my path back to the church, and I really enjoyed rereading it. I hadn't remembered a lot. So if you don't know who Dorothy Day is, she was a communist back early on when the Bolsheviks had just revolted. She became a journalist, but she wound up converting to Catholicism, and she started the Catholic Worker newspaper and the hospitality houses that there are in cities to help the poor and the homeless. And so she was quite a character, a very strong woman. And this is her story. So this was a really, really good read. I'm glad I reconnected with something that really inspired me. And then at the same time that I bought this from Thrift Books, I saw that they had this by Dorothy Day, Therese. So is it October 1st? Is that the feast of St. Therese of Lisieux? I decided I was going to read this in October. Oh my gosh, it was so inspirational. It was such a beautiful book. If you want to read about St. Therese, if you're interested in learning about her, number one resource, I think. I mean, besides what she wrote. But what she wrote, The Story of a Soul, I don't know. I think if you're not Catholic, you can still get it and appreciate it. But I think it would be harder. So I think this might be a better way to learn about her. Might inspire you to read her Story of the Soul. Anyway, this was an excellent and inspirational book. I highly, highly enjoyed reading that one. Then after Easter, I had vowed to myself that I was going to reread this, The Introduction to Christianity by Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger. He became Benedict XVI. And I had read it in 2023, and it took taken me about 5 months, and I wanted to reread it pretty soon because it's really deep stuff. And I told myself I was going to read it in the 50 days of Easter, the Easter season, the liturgical season, and that goes from Easter to Pentecost. So I think it took me a couple days longer than that, but I reread it. This is just so, I mean, this is like a book that should be reread every year, I think. And one thing that he does is he mentions Teilhard de Chardin. And we also this past year watched a documentary about Teilhard de Chardin, which I found really interesting, and it makes me want to learn more about Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. Anyway, you might not know who I'm talking about. But anyway, this was a really good, deep read. I wish I could talk more, in depth about it, but I don't even think I have the capacity right now. I'd have to sit and really look through it to trigger in my brain what it was about. It's not really an introduction to Christianity. What he does is he goes through the creed and explains everything, but he explains it in an incredible way, like just way outside the box. Just really, really good stuff. And then as the election was coming up, some of us on the Theology Book Club read Compassion and Conviction. This was a reread for me. I don't know how many times I've read it now, 3 or 4 times. And this is just, it's not a thick book, but it just, if you're Christian, it asks you to step back from being partisan and really examine your relationship to politics in light of your faith. Whether you lean left or right, it doesn't matter. Your faith life should come first. Your relationship with God comes first, and then other things flow from that. And you might be someone who agrees more with the policies on the left. You might be someone who agrees with the policies on the right. Neither one align perfectly with Christianity. So you have to pick one, and then maybe you should work to make that party better and more reflect kind of the universal values. So this was a very, very wise, pithy book, and I enjoyed rereading it a lot. I kind of dropped the ball. I was supposed to put the questions for each of the chapters up on the Theology Book Club, and people just sort of stopped reading it, and I had already finished it. So I did some, but then I dropped the ball and never finished it. So I apologize for that. And then this book tied right in with the Revelation study, because this is The Lamb's Supper, the Mass as Heaven on Earth by Scott Hahn. And it talks all about how the way the Catholic liturgy is designed reflects many aspects from the book of Revelation. And it's really neat. It's really, really cool. It was an pretty easy read, and he's very deep, but he's always he always does these puns. He's a terrible punster. Yeah, like holy smoke. So he's kind of, here we go. Mariah Carey. He's so silly. Anyway, so this was a very enjoyable book, and it kind of clinched. It really went with this and kind of really worked well with it. And then, of course, the thing that I just talked about is I finished The Lord. And, of course, the end of this book had to do with Revelation as well. So I had a lot of... The first part of the year was very Paul heavy, and the second part of the year was very Revelation heavy. And then the very last thing I did is I reread the Gospel of Luke, but after each chapter I summarized, and I just mentioned this in my last video, so yeah. So in my commonplace book. So yeah, it was a great reading year in terms of theology. I had a good time, and I hope next year, or not next year, this year, 2025, will be good as well. So I thought I'd talk really briefly about that. I'm going to talk about the Theology Book Club. Let me see if I can get to the first book. The first book that we're going to read in the first quarter of the Theology Book Club is The Question of Canon by Michael J. Kruger. I believe you can get this book. It's expensive to buy it, but I think you can get it on Audible. And I know you can get it for like $7.99 or something on your Kindle. So that's the way, or you can look for it used somewhere, but I don't think there was a huge publication. I think it means, a very wide number of this book published, because it's a narrow topic. And so I think it's a little bit hard to find it used. So I hope people can find it. And if not, tell me and I'll try to help. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up a new invite on the Theology Book Club, and I'll put the link below. And if you want to join to read the question of Canon, please join. We're also talking about other things on the Theology Book Club site at Discord. I expanded it. We're doing prayer requests, and we're also I named a channel Theological Thoughts. So if you're reading other things, you want to come in and talk about them, mention them. If you have questions, any kind of experience or whatever, can go in that category. And I'll make a new channel for the question of Canon. And my plan is to, at the end of the quarter, so sometime in late March, we will have a live discussion of this. And midway through, I'm going to see if I can do a movie. We can watch a movie together, maybe like right around February 14th. That's on a Friday, so maybe you have a date or something. You don't want to do it Friday evening. I have to figure out when we did it, when we had our last live discussion, because we do have somebody in the Theological Book Club who's in New Zealand. But it worked out. It worked out for me anyway. I think it worked out for California, and I think it was okay in New Zealand. I think she was the next day in the morning, and we were doing it at night over here in the U.S. So I'll have to figure all that out. And also, please, if you have any suggestions for movies that we might want to watch, please leave them in the comments, or if you join the Theological Book Club, Theology Book Club. What did I name it? I don't know. You could probably just put that like in the general section. There's a general channel there where you can introduce yourself and share maybe general information. And so, yeah, put suggestions there. But I don't know if we want to like go with, February 14th is about halfway through the quarter, and that's when I was intending to do the film watching. So could be tied to that. It could be tied to, the time period when the canon was put together, or it could be something else entirely. I really don't know. But I need suggestions, please. Give me suggestions. So we're going to read this the first quarter. The second quarter, we're going to read an essay on the development of Christian doctrine by John Henry Cardinal Newman. Now, I thought this was a slim thing. You can get this online. You can read this online entirely. I think that when I did take a theology class, and that's when I read this, but I obviously did not read the whole thing because I thought it was much shorter. So I think what he does is he gives the general theory. Yeah, so the first part, it's doctrinal developments viewed in themselves. That's the introduction. And there's chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4 is part 1. But then there's a part 2, and I think that when I was in this class, I did not read part 2, because part 2, he goes through and gives examples of each of the instances. So he says that there, I think it's 7 notes, he calls them notes, but they're like 7 tests for whether doctrine is being developed in an orthodox way, or that meaning in a way that's true to its original meaning. And then he goes through and he gives examples of each of those things. So I don't know if we just want to read the first part, which in this edition ends on page 148, or at least that's when this last section starts. Let me look. 148. How many? Oh my gosh, I'm really talking a lot. Gosh. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, or we could try to read the whole thing. We do have 3 months. We could try to get through the whole thing, and maybe some people will decide to only read the first part, and some people will decide to read the whole thing. But anyway, this is available for free online. The third quarter, we're going to study Eberhard Arnold's writings. He started the Bruderhof. He was a German, and very interesting. If you know the magazine The Plow, that is inspired by him. So that's third quarter. And then the last quarter, we were going to read the book of Isaiah. You would just get your own study, and we would just read along and then discuss Isaiah in that last fourth quarter. So that's the Theology Book Club. I think I'll just end it there because I'm already 25 minutes. And I vowed this year I was going to make everything shorter. I did just want to talk about what I'm doing. You know what? I won't do it right now because I don't want to make this any longer. All right. So I hope this is helpful. I will get the link to the Theology Book Club up. And hopefully you will join us. And it will be a wonderful year of studying and growing closer to God. Okay. Bye-bye.